If you've been following the Pocketnow Weekly and any of my own content over the last few months, you know that I actually applaud the notch. Not because I thought it actually led to anything truly worthwhile, but because smartphone manufacturers began scrambling to find ways of abolishing it. We gotta look at what could be the new craze, the hole punch. And it was just a little while ago with the Honor View 20. But while I don't hate the hole punch at all, I do have one problem with it. It is leading to the death of some really fun form factors that barely had any time in the sun. This is Pocketnow and I'm Joshua Vergara. What's going on, everybody? And this is a look at one of the last bastions of the slider design. This is a look at the Xiaomi Mi Mix 3. Now before I begin, a disclaimer. This won't be a super in-depth review. I will give some thoughts on my experience with this phone, but the focus of this video is on the different design concepts that came after the notch, but before the new hole punches. Spoiler alert, I adore this phone. Not just because it is different from pretty much any other flagship out there right now, but also because it fulfills a promise that Xiaomi made with their first Mi Mix device. Look at that screen. The supposed future of the smartphone was supposed to have no compromises in the display. What you're supposed to have in your hand, according to Xiaomi, was a glorious presentation of the digital world. And while Xiaomi tried to make that a reality by putting the front-facing camera on the bottom of their first two attempts, they realized that they could just hide it all together by putting it literally behind the display. And so, slide it on down, and there it is. The return of the slider concept was not only exciting but also really addicting. Just that tactile movement and click up and down for the screen meant that the Mi Mix 3 could be the same fidget toy that sliders of old used to be. And MIUI even baked in some extra fun in the form of sound effects when the slide occurred. And this was on top of extra functions for when one slides down the screen from standby. Now, while fun, the sliding mechanism makes way for the true joy of this phone, using a full screen with no interruptions. Seriously, this Super AMOLED screen looks great and gives you everything, no compromises. You don't really notice things like notches and hole punches and other devices until you get to use a literal full screen like this. Media looks great and games like the newly released nostalgia trip Ragnarok M perform wonderfully, especially because of the internal specs. I actually got decent battery life during my binges of the game, reaching 4 hours of screen on time when I just couldn't stop trying to reach Monk class with my character. You get the Snapdragon 845 along with 6, 8, or even 10 gigabytes of RAM in a special edition of the phone, and you can get up to 256 gigabytes of onboard storage. The body was made of Xiaomi's trademark ceramic that can slip when you're trying to slide the screen down, but thankfully in the box is a case included so you can help maintain your grip. An extra button triggers voice assistance, which means Google Assistant in this global edition of the phone and ROM. And they also kept the traditional fingerprint reader on the back. MIUI got some updates since I first got my hands on this phone, and while it won't be most people's cup of tea, I actually think it is really simple and clean. It has a certain speed and smoothness that makes up for the lack of an app drawer, and some extra features help add to the overall experience, like the app vault. The hiding front-facing camera reminds you to slide the screen down when getting selfies, but the pictures come out looking pretty decent, albeit a bit soft because of the beauty modes and because this is kind of common in Chinese phones. Now, DxOMark gave the rear cameras a really good mark, and the dual 12-megapixel shooters indeed do a good job. Pictures come out looking pretty detailed, the colors look fine, and for the most part, there's not a whole lot of noise until you get into lower light shots. And it's at this point that the phone comes with its own version of a night mode, where 8 photos are taken at different exposures to combine and make one final result. This night mode is pretty quick too, making it useful in more situations where long exposure might be a nuisance. While some other camera-forward phones might have a bit more to offer, there's no denying that Xiaomi did a great job of tuning their shooter, and it definitely deserves those high marks. Okay, so there aren't too many bells and whistles aside from the sliding mechanism, and honestly, I think that was the right move. Aside from a snap here and a snap there, the rest of the phone is familiar and doesn't mess with the established top-tier formula. And that was where smartphones, at least out in Asia, were headed, with other companies trying to do the same but in different ways. There was the Honor Magic 2, which was also a slider. There was the Vivo Nex, which made just the camera motorized. And then there was the Oppo Find X, which might have done all of the above in the most stylish manner. It's also just a bit cooler in general because that motorized top portion also does a face unlock, a feature that my Mi Mix 3 still hasn't gotten in a software update. I think that the Mi Mix 3 is the most well-rounded of all of these phones, especially due to its much lower price than competing flagships. But I also think the reason why I will always think of this phone fondly is its cool factor. Sure, you sacrifice waterproofing for a unique design, but personally I don't really mind. And having features tied to the sliding mechanism just adds a little more functionality to the established formula. But with the onslaught of hole punch phones we're about to get this season, I can't help but feel a little disappointed that we might not get phones like this anymore. The slider simply had no time to get in more people's hands, and now the big brands are going to start cutting holes in their displays, or they might just straight up start bending them for the rest of the year. So here's my question. Many of you were excited to see this phone after my hands on, and you might have been excited to see the slider design in general. But do you think it's gone all too soon? And do you think the hole punch phones will be as cool as this, or even the Oppo Find X? Let's have that discussion in the comment sections down below. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this review, this short-ish review of the Xiaomi Mi Mix 3. I'm not trying to disparage the fact that in 2019 we're going to get phones that actually bend, and the hole punch itself is actually not all that bad. But I do think that we have room for phones like this, for manufacturers to actually get creative with their designs, and also to just make them fun again. But if there's one takeaway that you can have here, it's that when things get a little bit weird when it comes to the design of a phone, it could still be a really well-performing, well-rounded flagship. And that's exactly what the Xiaomi Mi Mix 3 is. Don't forget to subscribe to Pocket Now for all of the best coverage, including the Pocket Now Daily and of course the Pocket Now Weekly, of which I am a host. You can also subscribe to my channel if you want to see what I'm up to, and I did a couple of other pieces with this phone there as well. The links are appearing right now and they're also in the description down below. You can also drop some likes on these videos and let us know what you think in the comment sections once again as you answer the questions that I posed in this video. And until the next one, we're going to go ahead and just call it on this one and see you next time.